Welcome back into the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers on SI. Joey Van Zummeren and Michael Stamps here to talk all things Mizzou at the SEC Media Days today in Atlanta. Eli Drinkwitz making waves. Michael, do you want to talk about whether or not Tupac is real, any other conspiracy theories on your mind, or just fine with Mizzou football?
I mean, I'm fine with Mizzou football. I will say, I think everyone knew that Eli Drinkwitz was a character. We can go with that. Maybe this just confirms that, or maybe it's the start of a side hustle comedy club in Columbia that we don't know about yet. I don't know. I mean, listen, the 10 words we spoke to each other before we started this, we both agreed that we were tired, but I will say that that early in the morning with, whatever going on, it was nice to have some comedic relief, because that was quite literally some of the first stuff we heard this morning. And even on the SEC This Morning show, he was cracking jokes. I told you, like, he said he didn't have a speech prepared, but he definitely had jokes ready. So
yes,
gotta respect it, I guess, because it was funny. I feel like they landed pretty well.
Yeah, last year his opening speech was going through every single position on the roster, and he just did that in the spring. So I guess nothing new to really add there, and I appreciated this one much better. So let's talk into what he actually said, though. First off, the quarterback competition, the top thing on everybody's mind going into this, and really nothing new to report on here, which is pretty much the news of it, besides the fact that Sam Horn is going to play football for Missouri in the fall, even after being drafted, if there was any question about that. And the only other thing I thought that was interesting he said about it, but I mean, this is pretty much the only thing he could say, is that if it is 100% a real competition, it is not something, at least in his words, that is for a competitive advantage, or not trying to hide who their quarterback is to give teams a challenge and how they're going to prepare for Missouri. Although, I mean, you would think they don't play South Carolina until 4 games into the season. I don't know how much deception would really earn them. And here's what I'll also say about that, because I've gone back and forth on this a few times on the legitimacy of this competition. And again, my main thought on it is, yes, I do think Bo Papula is going to end up winning this job, but I do think Sam Horn is talented enough to win it and will have the opportunity to do so. And as far as it being a competitive advantage, I mean, when we were there for spring practices, at least for the sessions open to the media, they were splitting playing time evenly with the ones Bo and Sam were, at least from what we could see again. And Eli had said today on the SEC network that it would be easier for them to name a starting quarterback. And obviously, like, externally, there's no like benefit per se of everybody knowing, but internally there would be. And so the fact that they are still going about this internally, it would literally be a waste of time to be giving Sam Horn number 1 reps if they weren't seriously considering him, in my opinion. So that's what I have to say on it. Anything to add there, Michael?
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, like I kind of alluded to, I said that Eli Drinkwitz is a character, and he likes to say things, and every coach has their fair share of coaches speak, and so does he. But at this point, it's not a gimmick anymore. Like, there's validity to it. If anything, it maybe needs to change the way that we're talking about it and reporting on it, if we're being perfectly honest, because I feels like we've been giving the credit to Sam Horn that he's there, but it kind of seems like we're all operating under the impression that Bo Papula is going to be the starter. And like I said, I agree with you. I do agree that Sam Horn is talented enough to be the starter, and there probably is a universe where that could happen, but I firmly believe that Bo will be the guy, at least on day one. I think they're going to be ready to give Sam the chance if, they think Bo's not living up to those expectations. But yeah, I mean, it's a valid quarterback battle. And if anything, maybe we need to give more credit to Sam Horn. I don't know how, I mean, it's all, I don't want to say it's opinionated, but we haven't really seen either guy play all that much. We're kind of just going off of opinions and the limited time we have seen them play. So yeah, could be Sam, could be Bo. We have no idea. I don't think we're gonna know until game one. So I completely agree with you. If, like I said, if anything, maybe we need to give a little bit more credit to Sam. It's hard to give credit to either of them though, because we haven't really seen him play much. So maybe at the end of the day, we just don't know what we're talking about at all.
Right. And the other competitions he addressed in the session with the local media to start the day, this one he was a little less energetic in. You could tell he's just getting that first coffee in, I'd assume. But he did give good answers and insight into competition along the offensive line and cornerbacks. Um, First big news of the day was that Connor Tolson is going to be expected to be ready to go for week one after that season-ending knee injury he suffered in November, which I think one is pretty impressive, but isn't going to be full go at the start of fall camp, at least here. He did name Dominic Giudice the starting right guard, basically. He didn't list anybody else there. He said that that's going to be Giudice's primary position this season. He didn't say that there was going to be a competition with Jalen Early or anything like that. Left tackle, though, I thought it was interesting the names he listed here. So he starts off with Javen Richardson, who we've kind of operated under the assumption is a favorite to win that job. But then he said Brennan Solis, Whit Hafer, and Jalen Early. Really, I think it's between Javen and Jalen. But he said there's a lot of guys, and he continued to praise Tristan Wilson, who is a guy that we surprisingly became familiar with in the spring, taking a lot of reps there, including at backup center. And so if Dominic Giudice gets that right guard job, which seems like he will, then Tristan Wilson will be the backup center, even with Tolson back. And Drinkwitz went as far as to say we really have 4 starters along the interior, including Tristan Wilson in that group, which I think said a lot. And then he also said that Logan Riker is still battling injury. Last year, he was dealing with a foot or ankle problem near the end of last season and seeming like that's carrying over, which is unfortunate. But what do you make of, Giudice winning that right guard job and kind of Jalen not being in the consideration for that? And then also what's going on at left guard or left tackle, rather?
Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise to see Dominic walk away with the assumed starting spot. He probably makes the most sense there. Jalen Early, I believe got snaps there last season, but he was kind of all over the place. I think it was left tackle, right guard, right tackle. I want to say he was the most at left tackle, or it was either one of the tackle positions. So, not really a surprise there. And I think given he received so many, first team reps at center, and he's been all over the place in his career and kind of been a guy that Michigan leaned on to be able to play multiple positions. That's a guy I'd feel comfortable with playing there. And I think most of us would agree that that's kind of who we thought was going to end up there. At left tackle, it's obviously Javen and Jalen Early were guys we thought were going to be there. If I'm wrong, please tell me, but did we hear anything about Johnny Williams?
He didn't mention him in that group, but I would still imagine he's competing for that spot.
Yeah, if we're going by this, I'll let you go ahead. Do you have?
No, I was just gonna say I would think he has a better chance than Whit Hafer.
Yeah. I guess you never know. But if we're going off the list that he gave us, no Johnny is kind of interesting, and I just looked it up to fact check, and he played 241 snaps last season, and like 239 of them were at left tackle. So that's his natural position. I don't know where else Johnny Williams fits. So we can still operate like he's going to earn that spot. But at the end of the day, Jalen and Javen and Johnny, the 3 J's, that's confusing. All of them are probably going to either starting caliber players now or will be in the future. So there's a little bit of overload there. I suppose, but it's I think that's arguably a more uncertain position than quarterback because according to Eli Drinkwitz, there's 5 players who can go there. So I don't really have anything else to say like that. It's kind of hard to pick a favorite. I don't know. Do you have a guy that stands out? I think I think Javen, I mean, the three J's, obviously, but it's kind of hard to pick one of them at the moment, it seems like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, really just Javen because he was the starting one in the spring. But other than that, I don't have any. But Jalen Early wasn't there in the spring too. So other than that,
Correct.
I don't really have any great insight to add on who should be the favorite there.
Yeah, I mean, they've all done it at their prior stop, so that's going to be an
Right.
interesting one to monitor. I kind of forgot that Wood Hafer was recruited as a tight end, I want to believe. So kind of
Yes.
fun to
Yeah.
see him. I guess I don't know if he's going to earn any or play at all or earn any run this season, but kind of cool to hear his name in consideration, I guess.
Yeah, and then the other thing on the offensive line to mention is a report from Power Mizzou today that Caleb Pyform is no longer with the team. No idea if that's like transfer or whatever, but he is just not with the team anymore on the offensive line. So no immediate impacts for this year, but just a note for the depth chart. On to the defensive side of things with cornerback. I was glad to hear Drinkwitz talk about this today because this isn't something that we discussed in the spring at all with the coaches of not only who's going to start at corner, but then also the depth because not only are they having Stephen All into the mix for a possible starting role, but then also they're losing Marcus Clark, their main depth guy at corner. And so he mentioned Drayden Norwood. We knew had a Achilles injury in the spring, but can presume he's going to have at least one of those starting boundary spots. He said Toriano Pride had his best spring. So in Missouri terms, that just means better than last year's. And then he said Stephen Hall's really hard worker. He said that toward the end of the spring, Stephen Hall started to have more confidence in his understanding of the scheme. Nick DeLoach is developing, regaining confidence from last year, I'm assuming. And then he says Cam Keys really has potential to contribute as well. And so either way with this group, we can say they have better depth than last year, I would say. And I mean, really, you're retaining your three starters, and you have a guy to replace Marcus Clark as well. So, and Cam Keys has another year of development under his belt. So, good things to like there. Like we said in our position review video, though, it's certainly not one that has a big standout, and there certainly is questions with either one of Toriano or Deloach or Hall starting there.
I think I said this last episode or 2 episodes ago. Maybe it was the position review, but Toriano and Nick made some not great mistakes last season that cost them big plays. I mean, I look back at the Vanderbilt game where I think there was one of those that was a big touchdown, and same, and maybe it was Boston College as well, where Toriano lets a big play go. I could be making that up, but something similar to that, but it was one of those two. Um, so those are things that just can't happen again. And this defense didn't exactly have a super high expectation last year, and they ended up performing really well. And you could make the argument that the corners were one of the weaker, if not the weakest position on the defense last year. So there's going to be a big expectation that they all step up. So yeah, nice to hear that they're coming along nicely, I suppose. But this is going to be a we need to see it for ourselves type of thing.
And then one more thing about the team overall before we get into Drinkwitz's thoughts on the SEC moving to 9 games possibly and possible expansions to the college football playoff format. Wanted to talk about what he said on SEC this morning, the program that you wrote about. And I thought these were honestly probably his most insightful comments of the day, to be honest, of the offense being not fun last year. I think was the most honest review of the team overall that we got, and especially the offense. And he hit on it a little bit toward the end of last year, but not as honest as I think he was in this one. Really saying that they played too conservative, really. And as we've talked about so much since the season has ended, there was a host of other factors playing into it. But I definitely agree. And I think a lot of the fan base would agree that they just kind of became a shell of themselves, and really, especially Luther's involvement in the offense was just kind of mysterious how it died down, and why he wasn't a main focus of the offense again was odd. So what were your thoughts on that? And kind of just recite more of what he had to say.
Yeah. You can tell me if you disagree. My biggest takeaway was that it kind of seems like maybe the leaders on that offense last year felt some of the outside noise and felt some pressure, which is kind of interesting for a team. And I don't need to reiterate, especially from earlier today at SEC Media Days, that Eli Drinkwitz is very much still on the something to prove, and we ignore the outside noise, whether it's for us or against us or in between. But he had a quote that this offense this year doesn't have the pressure to perform. Um, there's not this pressure of performance. There's an opportunity to just go out there and cut it loose. Those are his exact words, which maybe I'm looking too much into this and twisting his words, but it kind of seems to me that he's implying that last year that some of those guys like Brady, like Luther, like Theo, and maybe others felt the pressure and felt the noise a little bit. And that's why they struggled. And maybe I'm looking too much into that, but going off his words specifically, it's good that these guys don't necessarily feel the pressure because the expectations are probably lower than what they were last year. And there's obviously different guys at each position. We don't need to beat that over anyone's head, but it's good that there's not necessarily any pressure. So that was kind of my big takeaway. Again, it was nice to hear him have a candid and brutally honest, I guess, opinion about how the offense was last year. It's not like, I would have probably thought that he wasn't all that pleased about how the offense performed last year. So it's not like he's, putting out a hot take like some of the other stuff he might have said. I mean, not from the outside, but pressure to build on what they had done the season before, because obviously that year when they go to the Cotton Bowl, there weren't really many offensive lapses, especially in the later part of the season. They were really good. The deep ball was working, and obviously you have Cody Schrader, and everything was just, it was great. So wasn't like that last year, obviously, and maybe that's the comparison, or that's where the pressure came from. Obviously, we don't know.
Yeah, I think it's much closer to the second part that you eventually led yourself to of internally than externally. And I think just the internal pressure you build with inside yourself to not only to repeat it for what they had in 2023, to build off it, to be more successful, to meet their hopes, as real as the expectations for Missouri on the outside were to compete for a college football playoff spot. The team believed that themselves clearly. And so not being able to meet those internal expectations, and then also just the fact of like, all right, we got one more year, like this is our last chance to really put it all together for all of those guys that you mentioned in there, I think is probably where a lot of that came from. So yeah, I can definitely see alleviating that being a helpful thing for them. All right, on to what Eli Drinkwitz had to say about some possible changes coming to the SEC and college football playoff format. Let's start off with the college football playoff because I think that's a little, obviously, a lot more interesting with the headlines that's grabbed today. So, first off, no, Eli Drinkwitz is not advocating for 30 teams to be in the college football playoff field. He did not a not so great job at explaining what he was actually proposing in his main press conference and spent the rest of the day trying to clarify on social medias and other interviews. But from what he's explained in those, basically what he's suggesting is really just what the Big Ten has been in favor of four automatic or four bids for the SEC and Big Ten, two for the ACC and Big 12, and one for Group of Five. However, all of those spots being decided by playing games. Basically, Drinkwitz's main things is he doesn't like the idea of a selection committee, which I think is completely fair. I think the idea of a selection committee choosing playoff spots, I mean, even already with four, although like that, I think with four, that's the best you can do. There's really no great fair way to determine that otherwise, just because of the amount of teams. But especially with 12, I think it's so defeating to the fan experience to be like, no matter what, in some cases, you can have just an incredible season and it might not even matter because you're not like you're not selected and it can be such a minute thing. Like I think that's defeating to the fan experience. Again, I think this would bring some challenges to it. I think though that it would create some upset fan bases because there it would be cases if you have, especially for the SEC and Big Ten, to have 4 playing games between 8 teams. There's going to be some cases where teams lose to teams that they are not worse in. Like there is going to be some more variability with this. There is going to be some upsets as there is in every single week of college football. But I mean, if you're expanding the college football playoff field, you're going to have that variability anyways because of more games. And like Drinkwitz said, like this is creates a lot more games to watch, a lot more interesting games to watch. It solves the problem of conference championship games being not significant because you just wouldn't play them. I guess I don't know how they would decide how they would decide conference champions, but if they would go with a model like this and other models that have been suggested, conference champions don't matter. I guess you just give it to the best record, something like that, all those tiebreakers. But again, it wouldn't really matter. So it's more interesting games. It's more home games, like Drinkwood said as well, home important games. So to me, I struggle to see outside of some top teams being upset. I struggle to see too many downsides with this. What do you think?
Well, I think there's two obvious comparisons to what Eli Drinkwitz is talking about. Obviously, there's the NFL playoff format, which I don't think people really. I mean, you'd know more about the NFL than I do, Joey. I feel like people don't really have any complaints about it, right? Not generally. And then there's March Madness, which is probably no, it is the most beloved college sporting tournament slash event, and I think people are pretty happy with where that's at as well. And when you think about um, what's so exciting about March Madness, it's the variability, and it's the fact that a lot of the times the best teams are, one of the 10 or 15 highest ranked teams in the country usually ends up winning the tournament, but that's not always the case. And that 3 of the 4 number 1 seeds can lose every year. Like people root for that to happen. That's what's exciting about it. I don't know why that's not exciting in college football. Like when there is little to no variability in college football, and even when it's a new team, like I guess in recent memory, like Michigan, obviously Michigan has history. I'm not saying they didn't, but Michigan wins a national title, right? Um, they were still like a top 4 seed. So even when it's a new team that comes around, they've still dominated the recruiting scene, have one of the best quarterbacks, have one of the best head coaches. So like I think adding variability to it, I don't know why that would be an issue. So in my roundabout point being, I'd have no issues with what Eli Drinkwitz really said at all. It would create some challenges. I think more games for the players. I don't know how they would feel. I draw the comparison to the college football playoff to March Madness, and March Madness is significantly more exciting because there's the chance that a 16 seed could beat a 1 seed and things like that. And I think Eli Drinkwitz made a good point as well that more teams is more fun. You said it as well. The chance for a smaller team to have the perfect game and knock off an Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, one of the big guys would, I mean, be great for viewership and exciting and on social media and all that stuff. So at the end of it, I mean, I don't really have any complaints on what he said. Like I do agree with you that there would be some challenges, but one of Eli's big points was that it's for the players and it's for the fans. And I think specifically for the fans, this would be a massive win because people love watching college football. I don't know the viewership statistics, but I'd imagine across the college sports, it's either 1A or 1B or 1 to college basketball. It's probably the top watched college sport, I would imagine. People aren't going to say no to watching more high end, playoff football games. So for that reason, it's fine as well. So I think what he said got definitely twisted and misconstrued a little bit right away. So shout out to Eli Drinkwitz for defending himself a little bit and doubling down on what he said, because it actually did add some much needed context. But yeah, I don't really have any major issues with what he said at all.
I think the comparison you make to March Madness is a really good point because the excitement of the tournament is the chaos that happens. And I think what really annoyed me with this first run of the 12-team college football playoff was all of the Lane Kiffins and Shane Beamers of the world um, complaining about the little differences of their resume, and especially I can't stand the boasting about the conference and how difficult the conference is. I like obviously there is some weight to that, but my whole thing with it is just win your games, right? And so the same would be said for if because undoubtedly there would be teams that if they're in the top 4 seeds of the SEC, so they get to host these playing games. And undoubtedly, there would be some from time to time that lose in those top 4. And if it wasn't for these playing game, they would be in the playoff. But then again, it's like, well, just win the playing game, right? And so I really like the comparison to the NCAA tournament and all of the chaos that happens there. As far as the schedule, like you mentioned, I mean, there wouldn't be. Yes, there'd be some teams that play this playing game for nothing, and then I guess I mean, it would have to be considered. Do you still consider those teams that lose a playing game for a bowl? I say no, just because I mean, usually it would be 2 weeks delayed of when those bowl games are usually decided, and there's a lot of prep that goes into that. So, really, I mean, if you end up losing the playing game, then your season is shorter than it would be if you went to play a bowl game, and then the playoffs would be right on track. There would be the same amount of games after that, and I don't like how the playoff schedule and the all season schedule is set up, but it would be the same. So, yeah, I think I hope people can come around to realize that the one, it's not as far stretched as it seems, and two, I I really think it would be a fun idea at least.
Calling it a 30-team playoff is probably slightly misleading.
Right.
What one thing I wanted to say as well, I tell you I agree with you a lot, but this might be like the number one thing I've ever agreed with you on is like just win the game. Um, like Ole Miss lost a game they shouldn't have won. I want to say it was to Kentucky or something like that. So it's just like win your games, and like Missouri had a great season last year, but no one was complaining. Like they lost 3 games. So and same thing with the 10-2 season before. Like no one was complaining that they didn't like. Obviously, a little bit of a stretch, but you get the idea. But the same thing could be said for March Madness when you look at like flash to the past when Purdue loses to Farley Dickinson as a 1 seed to a 16 seed, or Virginia loses to UMBC, a 1 seed to a 16 seed. Like, you shouldn't lose that game. Don't lose it. And don't cry when you lose that, whatever unfair advantage. Like, if we hypothetically have these playing games and a team that's supposed to win loses, it's not anyone's fault but yourself. It's not the system. It's not a change. It's not we played on this field at this time at this location. It's that you didn't play good enough and you lost. So I completely agree with you that I'm sure if in the world where this does happen that we would get the whiners and complainers. It doesn't seem like we can really avoid that. But just win the football game. I couldn't agree with you more.
Right, exactly. And like you drew the comparison to the NFL playoffs, and I mean, really, with any playoff format, there's going to be times where it's not fair, isn't even the right word, but like just even where there's going to be teams that seasons are going to cut short, like that Purdue team. It's like to me that just adds to the excitement of it. That's why you play the game.
Yeah. And another thing I want to add that just popped into my head, it's like I think football naturally compared to basketball is a sport that doesn't allow for as many upsets. Like you don't see a ton
Right.
of upsets in the NFL in the regular season or in the playoffs. So it's not like even if they do make this switch, I don't think like I don't think you're going to see your Ohio States, Alabama's, Georgia's, your top tier programs. I don't think you're going to be seeing those teams losing every year. But same could be said like even in March Madness, you don't see your one seeds losing in the first round every year. I mean, it happens, and that's what's exciting about it. But you don't see these teams losing every year because they're supposed to win. I think football is obviously such a it's a much more physical game. I think than basketball, and there are pretty clear athletic differences in the top tier football teams from one tier one to tier two, and then especially tier three, tier four, and so forth. So that's just another thought as well. Like I don't think these teams are going to lose that much, but everyone has off days, and that's what would make it exciting.
Right. Yeah. And just looking at the SEC standings from last year, if this applied, so Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama would have been the top 4 seeds. And I mean, Ole Miss and South Carolina probably pose challenge. I mean, Ole Miss has to play against Tennessee, South Carolina, against Texas. Like, I really think the teams that finished in the top 4 of the SEC would be the same 4 that would end up winning those games. Of course, so we're talking about upsets, and there would be some that happen. That's the whole point of creating excitement for these games. But it's not like the college football playoff matchups were all that entertaining in themselves either. So, lot to watch there. But I liked Drinkwitz's mindset on it, and he had said in another press conference he had of that he was thinking that morning of Mike Leach, and he said that Mike Leach would not hesitate to say what he wanted to. So I like that.
I love that he started up this conversation because it's a controversial one, but it's probably a good one for the sake of college football. So I like it a lot.
Right. And the other thing he was asked about in that question is going to 8 tonight games for the SEC. Really enjoyed his answer too. And he said, again, if it was about the players and fans, I think it's a 9-game schedule for the SEC. If it's about coach preservation, so coaches saving the career, hey man, I get it. But if we're going to go to 11 humans, a selection committee, deciding which are the 11 best teams, and we stay at 8, we ain't getting in. I don't know if he was trying to do a little play on words there. But I mean, to me, that's the main thing with SEC. Again, if of the talking about how it's the best conference and trying to build the resume through it, you're going to get a much better resume booster against another SEC team than playing against a really low level non-con opponent, and you would just have to be more smarter with your non-con choices. So I agree with him there. And to the same point, again, nobody wants to watch these lower level non-con games. Like, I'd much rather see Missouri play Ole Miss, even Kentucky, than UMass this season. So that's all I have on that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like we've behind the scenes said multiple times, like, gosh, I wish Missouri would play Texas while we're in college or Ole Miss or something like that. I will stand my ground there. I hope to see them play those teams. Obviously, we don't know what the schedules look like in the future, but yeah, I completely agree. I mean, why Missouri's playing UMass? I don't even know. It kind of speaks to it. And you look at I feel like Alabama plays Mercer at the end of every season. Like it. Part of me is like, does it like not validate some of these quote unquote strength of schedules and great records that your Georgia and Alabama's have when 2 of their 4 or 5 or 3 of their 4 or 5 non-con games are not that good, and Alabama's not to this is just off the top of my head. I'm not going after Alabama, but Alabama plays Wisconsin, and I think
Yep.
that's their Power 5. I think that's their sole Power 5 non-con opponent, unless they have one of the big ones. You can fact check that for me, Joey, while I continue to rant. But no, I
they
want
play
to make
Florida
sure.
State as well to open the season.
Okay, sure. So I think that still helps my point, honestly. But it's not like, I mean, I'll make the college basketball comparison again, not to the number of games, but to the level of competition. Like you see some like Kentucky and Duke and Kansas and Michigan State every single season are in a they split up and play each other, and like you see like Alabama basketball actually usually has one of the best strength of schedules with the non-conference. Nate Oates loves to schedule hard games, and obviously it's a different situation because they they play so much more games. But I don't know, it kind of feels like some of these are meaningless, and I understand throwing one or two of those easy ones on, but at some point 4 or 5 freebie games doesn't really look all that good under schedule. And obviously you win and you get a few under your belt, but I feel like that's been a question about the SEC for a little while, is that maybe their non-con games not doesn't validate exactly how good these teams really are. So I think I'm gonna have to agree with this one as well.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, I mean, the other side of this is that those lower level schools pretty much need those games where they get beat by 50 to survive. Um, so there's that part of it. But yeah, I mean, the SEC having 8 conference games and the Big Ten having 9, I think it makes it really difficult to have these conversations in an even playing field when they're trying to create all these changes. So that's that. Like Drinkwitz today. Do you have a favorite Drinkwitz moment from the day? A lot
Oh
to
my
choose from.
goodness. I actually just had one pulled up that I really liked. So you might need to come back to me on that because I can't find where it was.
Okay, because I have mine.
What was it?
Because so he's asked by this guy who's like, there was a few other coaches being asked about this during the week. I don't know if it was the same guy, but he was asked something along the lines of the fact that the SEC has not won the last 2 national championships. It's been Big Ten or it's been Michigan and Ohio State. Which, I mean, first off, to me, it's not like Michigan and Ohio State are like lowly programs on the rise and like turning things over in college football. Um, but and at first, I think this was an underappreciated moment at first, and I didn't appreciate it for what it's worth at the moment. But Drinkwitz just kind of stares into space for a few seconds, and then he just sighs. I thought it was so great, and I mean he listed off all the things that the SEC is accomplishing. I don't. To me, I don't understand what the question really is there. Like nothing is wrong in the SEC. I mean, besides the embarrassing showings in the college football playoff last year. But again, nothing. The SEC is not losing its dominance, and I thought Drinkwitz handled it well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you could pick anything he said in his opening monologue. I'm not going to, because there was a moment that stood out to me, and he mentioned it twice. He mentioned it in his main stage thing, and as well on the SEC Now show, which was a couple 30 minutes after he was on the main stage. But he was asked about Ahmad Hardy. And everyone knows about the fishing or the horseback riding, but he mentioned a story about them fishing and Ahmad Hardy and Santana Banner fishing in his neighborhood community pond that the homeowners association in his neighborhood got mad at Drinkwitz, Ahmad Hardy, and Santana Banner for fishing in their their community pond. So I'll go with that. That was pretty funny. I
Hey,
mean,
I
well,
used to live in a neighborhood that had a community pond like that, and the people in the HOA do not mess around about that stuff.
yeah. I mean, one of the SEC Now hosts asked him "Hey," he asked do you get any favors or special special attention since you're the head football coach of Missouri? And his answer was yeah, you would think that, but they still didn't like that we were fishing in the community pond. So, he had a lot of good stuff, today. I think, yeah, there's obviously the one big one, but a lot of people seem to have really enjoyed and found what he said entertaining. I love that you put together like a highlight reel of what he said earlier today. That honestly made my day.
Yes, really enjoyed it. Exciting note to start the season here for Missouri. Fall camp starts next week, and the players will report. So a lot of exciting stuff to keep an eye on. So I hope you tune in to the rest of our coverage over on Missouri on SI throughout all of it.